Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Adi Mendiola Barreto. I use they, them pronouns. I'm non-binary, I'm trans. So when you say that I was speaking today or you heard me speak today, you would be like, I was talking to Adi or I saw Adi speak on stage today. They were talking all about themselves or a little bit about themselves instead of she or he. We're going to get started. I'm super excited to have you all and have a conversation today. We're going to do some introductions. We'll do names, pronouns, and even titles, how you got to your position today. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a senior account executive at Textio. Textio is an augmented writing platform that predicts, some of you are giving me like a thumbs up, you know, yes. Textio analyzes your language, and then will predict how people will respond to written text before they ever see it. And Textio will show you the better, more inclusive ways to communicate with folks. So I'm in charge and on that team. But I will let you all introduce yourselves, so some names, pronouns, and how you got to your current position today.
Okay, who wants to start? You can go.
So I'm Myra Noabi, and I am a senior project engineer at Lockheed Martin, and I work for our space division. I guess the pronoun is she, her is fine. You're going to learn about my first reset in life, and I'm going to talk about my 3 resets. I actually started in aeronautical engineering. I ended up leaving because I would have professors that would tell me, shouldn't you be home bare feet and pregnant? And there was a combination of a number of things, but mostly it boiled down to not having the support system that I needed to become an aeronautical engineer. And somebody said, well, you should become a teacher. So I did. I went and got a degree in education, and I taught for 4 years, and I hated it. And not that teaching is not a great field. It's for someone. It just wasn't for me. And the way I got to my current position is I did an 8-week internship at Lockheed, and it was do or die moment for me, and I decided I'm going to end up with a job. And luckily for me, I impressed a vice president at one of my presentations, and he asked me to come work for him. That was 15 years ago, and so there's my happy ending.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Miles, and I am the head of management development at VMware in Palo Alto. I've been in human resources for about 25-ish years, and various positions. I would say my journey to my current role has been a very windy one. I started out, really knowing specifically what I wanted to do right out of undergrad, and did it. And that was to really get into human resources. What really kind of drew me into the field was working specifically with people to give them a great place to work, and also to help them, develop the skills they needed to be successful. And throughout my career, I have had internal positions and external positions. And over the past, I would say, 10 plus years, I've started a business. I've gone back to school and did graduate school. I'm now in a PhD program. And then I had an epiphany and said, I may want to retire one day. And I don't know if I can have the energy to be a consultant and to hit that pavement every day as much to actually put back money for retirement. So let me go get a real job. Let me go get a good internal job, not real job. Let's ixnay out that just because I worked. Let's be clear, as a consultant. And then once I decided to return back to the workforce internally, I put that word out to very few people, only because there were only a few people that I trusted that was going to recommend the role that would be right for me. And it turned out that that was the role that I'm in now. And it's a great opportunity to work in my passion to help those, the managers, the people managers who actually get all the things across the line. If you're a people manager, raise your hand. You do the hardest job in the company. Forget the CEO. And so it's my passion to really help fuel that population, build their skills, capacities, and mindsets so that they can then do the great work and help the company to realize all their bottom line objectives. And so I get a chance to create that curriculum for them. So thanks for having me here.
Yeah, amazing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jane Wong. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
There we go. I grew up in England with Caucasian East Indian parents. Came here, married a Chinese Hawaiian man, and took his name. So now I confuse everyone. They literally walk into the you cannot be Jane Wong. I don't understand. So there's some melting pot going on there. I work for Symantec. I've been 25 years in tech, but the last time at Symantec, cybersecurity absolutely fascinates me. I've really flourished at Symantec, taking on increasingly more scope and contributing more. Right now, I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Product Management for our email security business. My team is spread across Pune, Chennai, Toronto, Reading, Mountain View, San Francisco. So a lot of late hours, like having meetings with all those different time zones and managing through different cultures. Right? The culture in each of those offices is very different. So a fascinating job. We're doing work that I think is really important at the world, and I'm glad to be there.
It's so inspiring to hear everybody's journey to their positions, and we're going to talk about power today. And Jane, I'm sorry, Robin. I'm looking at Robin. Robin, I'll start with you. How do you define power, and what else could it be, whether outside of your position? It doesn't necessarily have to be of authority, but how would you define power in your relationship to power?
So the way I define power in my heart, it has nothing to do with the title. It really has to do with how I feel in my body and the congruence that I have within my mind and my heart and my body. And that feels powerful to me. And I use that as a litmus because when I am not congruent, and I do this all the time for that not being congruent, when I'm congruent, I'm really centered like this. But when I am congruent, I am the most powerful. When I'm not congruent, meaning that I'm conflicted, I have a conflict with my mind and my heart. If you've ever been in love and gotten your heart broken, you know what I'm talking about. Your head says, get the hay out of there. Your heart says, oh, I love them, right? So, but when you are clear with your head and your heart, there's a groundedness to that. So I use that as my definition of power and how I feel in my body. So.
Yeah, thank you. And Myra, you've talked about your journey with, can you go a little bit deeper into the three phases, as you were calling it before, what that looks like?
Sure. So the three resets that I talked about, the first reset in my life happened when I was 6 years old. My last name, Nawabi, it means descendant of royalty. Nawab is a title. I'm sure Jane will attest to that. And so I was related to the last king of Afghanistan, and at the age of 6, the Russians invaded, and pretty much everything that I knew ended in that moment. And that led to 4 years of fleeing the country and then coming to Pakistan, living there for a couple of years, and then coming to the United States as a refugee. And the resilience that goes into that, I can't even begin. I'm sure someday I'll write a book about it, but for the time being, because it's short, I'm just going to tell you that there was incredible resilience that went into that journey. So you heard about my second reset, which was when I dropped out of aeronautical engineering. And my third reset in life happened when I filed for divorce and left my husband. And that again was hard reset, and it was hard because, you know, when you come from a Middle Eastern culture, it's not okay to ask for a divorce. That was difficult, you know, like you receive death threats and the family tells you, we've disowned you, we don't have anything to do with you from now on. But the most powerful I felt was in that moment when I made the decision to end that and take the power for myself and my daughter. And I knew in my heart of hearts that that was the right thing to do. And it's a decision I will retake anytime if I could go back in time.
Amazing. So much of our relationship to and with power is through our experiences. I feel like either of you definitely have stories as well. Is there anything that you want to share kind of about your stories and your relationship to power as it's a journey?
Are you looking at me?
Looking at both, either one of you.
I can share something. I definitely think there was a moment when I stepped in to like feeling who I am today, or my power. I remember it well because it was after 2 bottles of rosé with a friend in Dolores Park. got the juices flowing.
Wait, where was our invite? Why did I get invited?
Fantastic afternoon, but early in my career, being a woman in a very male-dominated environment, I felt like I had to be perfect. I felt like I had to know everything. I felt like I couldn't ask questions publicly. I had to run and research and then come back and know the answers. And I only was all about work. I didn't share a lot of personal stuff or my internal perspective on things. And as I kind of rose up and took on more scope, this just wasn't working anymore. It's like just a part of myself was going into work. And my friend's like, what are you afraid of? Why don't you bring your whole self to work? What is the worst thing that could happen? Why don't you just try it? And I thought about it and I'm like, am I afraid of? And I started just being me at work. And ever since that day and those amazing bottles of rosé, if I don't understand something, even if there's a whole group of people and there's really big deal people in the room, I would just ask a question. If people tell me they think a call is wrong, I'll admit, oh yeah, I made a mistake there. Thank you for showing me that. I'll thank people for teaching me things really openly. I'll admit when I don't know things. I have my sense of humor at work. And it just really changed from that moment, just when I realized, why do I have to pretend to be something I'm not and only take this sliver into the office of who I am? And it was a real turning point for me, and I have to say it's worked out, so I recommend it to anyone.
Well, I experienced something very similar. So I used to do employer branding campaigns. I would help Fortune and enterprise organizations attract more people from underrepresented groups to their teams through content marketing. And I was living in New York. I had long, luscious, beautiful hair, and people would call me things like spicy and a little jalapeno, and because I felt for me so much and that I was performing femininity. I wasn't really who I was. I was the idea. If being Latina was a test, I had passed with flying colors, right? I even got extra credit. Like, I was really good. And for me, when I realized there was that moment, right, and it was it was a lot of moments and experiences that I was like, and you were talking about love, Robin, is that I had realized I had loved in my life, but I had never shown people who I was, so I could never say that I was loved back. And that for me was such a huge turning point. I came out as trans, I came out as non-binary, and I told everybody at work. And that was something I wasn't ready for, right? I knew that the moment that I said it, I would never be able to take it back, because it was just an undeniable truth. And that type of authenticity and showing up, it takes so much courage and it takes so much vulnerability to look at whatever might expectations be of you or in any way. And that's something that collectively we face, right? The expectations of us, and then either not doing them or what that looks like, what the cost that it has if you're not authentic or you can't show up.
I think that's key, like being open to being vulnerable and to stop being afraid of being judged and that people are going to think, oh, you're not good enough. Why did you get this job, right? Just being vulnerable and being okay with that. I find that has really helped change the culture among the people I work with, because if a leader, you're vulnerable and sort of authentic in that way, the people around you start being like that, then with their teams, they start acting like that. And you wind up with a really transparent, open, trusting culture. Within our team, our retention rates are off the charts for this area in this industry. And I think part of it is because we've built that culture of trust and made those deeper relationships because we have shared things and we have been vulnerable and we don't present a facade at work.
I'd like to say something
Yeah,
about that
please.
topic. Part of my coming into power came about as a result of getting laid off during the recession. And during that time, I made it, if I had not been on the list to get laid off, seriously, something was going to happen, right? I'm like, please let me be on the list to be laid off. and I was so clueless, I didn't even know we were in a recession. That's how disconnected I was. I wasn't just disconnected from myself, but I was disconnected from the world. So during that time, I actually realized that a lot of my co-workers were like, on the hunt, trying to find jobs real quick, and I was like, I have to heal. I need to decompress. And I didn't realize how much, but a year later, I didn't work for one whole year. And during that time, I forced myself to answer the question, what are your dreams? Because I couldn't remember. There was something that was in my mind, like in my heart, that I wanted to pursue in my life, and I forgot. How do you do that? How do you forget your dreams? And I had to be quiet and sit with myself long enough for that to emerge back up to my heart, up to my consciousness. And one of the things that I did was, okay, I finally remembered that I wanted to go and be certified coach. So I chose a program, and I have a coach assigned to me because the first part of this program of becoming a coach is that you need to be a coachee. Be in the shoes of those who you coach. So my coach said to me, what is your inquiry going to be during this process? And we talked through it, and she says, I have one for you. She says, your inquiry is that your vulnerability is your power. And I said, you're crazy. Because I'm not going to be vulnerable for anybody. Defenses up. You're not going to hurt me. No, you're not going to pull the okie doke on me. So I really didn't understand it. I didn't understand it physically, spiritually, somatically, cognitively. And that was my work. And even after the program, I didn't understand it. I was really in reject mode. As I start to get more, I think, ingrained in my own transformation, really starting to transform, that's when I started to realize that I wasn't bringing my authentic self everywhere I went. I was holding back. I was not giving everyone the full dose of Robin because I didn't think they could handle it. Who am I to say that you can't handle it? They probably can't handle it. Let's be clear. I mean, I have been dealing with this a long time. The name Robin means bright flame. Bright flame. Woo! Yes, I bring it all. And but I realized that I wasn't doing that. And the moment I surrendered to that inquiry of your vulnerability is your power, that's when things started opening up for me.
It's huge.
It's huge. It speaks to the negative connotation that we've assigned to vulnerability, that it is associated with weakness, that it's associated with being less than, and it's exactly the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. I've never felt stronger than when I'm being vulnerable, admitting I don't know stuff, right?
Do others perceive you as powerful? And what do you think are some of the contributions to that perception?
When I tell people I'm African American, they automatically assume I'm Muslim. And they automatically assume that I'm supposed to be wearing a hijab. And I look at them and I go, where did you get that from? Right? And these are the stereotypical biases and perceptions that people have of someone like myself. They expect me to be a certain thing, and I have to undo all of that for them and say, I actually have no religion. I don't follow any deity. And One of the interesting stories I want to share with all of you is that a while ago there was a gentleman who had a genuine mental illness. He got in a car and he drove and he ended up killing 22 people. It was a while back, and here I am, this young person who has just joined a company, and somebody comes running to me and they're like, "Do you know him?" I'm like, "Do you think all Afghans are related to one another? Like, were you related to Timothy McVeigh?" You know, where do you get that perception, right? But I realized in those moments that this is a powerful moment. I can think to myself and say these things, or I could just turn this into a teaching moment. And I said, we're not all related. Right. And I don't know him. And how sad that this happened. But things like this happened here, and I would never presume to come to you and ask if you knew him. And in that moment, I realized that there are moments that you can take and you can turn into a powerful teachable moment. So people are going to create perceptions for you, whether you choose to or not. But it's also important for you to change that narrative when it comes at you, and it's the wrong narrative that's coming in your direction.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think are some other things that hold specifically women, non-binary people back who are folks of color?
Well, I'll just give one example because it just stayed with me. I was speaking at a Power to Fly recruiting event for Symantec, so completely targeting women. And after I'd spoken, 9 women came up to me. They said, "We're really interested in joining, but..." So the first, they all had things that were holding them back. A woman came to me and she's like, "I really want to be a product manager." I'm like, "Great, what have you done recently?" She said, "Well, I'm an engineer. I built some software, hired other engineers to make it bigger. Then we marketed it, and then it sold well, so I sold the company. But I've never had a PM job title." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You have so much. Are you really kidding me?" He didn't think she was qualified to be a product manager. All of these constraints they're not real. They're applied, and I'm like, this is a huge problem. Like, if folks aren't even applying because of these constraints that they're imposing on themselves, we're just losing half the people who might be interviewed for a job.
So what do you do in those scenarios? How do you how do you use your power, whether that's in these interactions? And, today we'll meet a ton of people. What does that look like?
One thing I immediately did is I went to our head of HR and said, we should change the way we post. We should not have 12 bullets for
Actually,
job
Symantec is a customer of Textio, by the way.
I'm like, we should change that because we're losing a lot of candidates
Right.
by posting this way. Let's do something differently.
Right. Robin, talk to me about some mentors or people that, whether you've mentored or some mentorship that has changed the course of your career, or what that looks like.
Yes. So I come from a very strong matriarchal family. There isn't, well, it's just an expectation for our girls to become women that stand sure-footed in their space. And I think that I didn't realize this until I was in high school. I had a project for school, and that was to interview my grandmother, and I find out what her story was. And my grandmother, if you looked at her, she would appear to be very meek, mild-mannered, soft-spoken, sweet face. We called her Honey.
Oh.
That was my grandmother. Don't.
I'm like, that's so cute though.
But I learned her story, and her story was that she was married, had 4 girls, young girls, and she had also given birth to twin boys who were stillborn, and her husband was abusive. She gathered her 4 young girls and got on a train in the late 30s by herself and went from Texas to Nevada to go to a cousin's house, fleeing from this abusive person. Now tell me something. Like, in my like, she wasn't, they're black like this, right? In the 30s. I wonder, how did she do that? Where did that come from? That didn't come from someone who is meek and mild. That came from a woman who was powerful. And we see that this is replicated in my family, and that's all I kind of knew, right? And we even see it, and we have this word for our nieces that come up. We're like, ooh, she's got it. Like, she's got it. Ooh, she's got it. We kind of look for it. But that's where it comes from. And those were my mentors. I didn't know not to be this way. And I'm super grateful for the example that they have led before me.
So community is so much a part of our power. My question is, if we know, let's say, I don't know, white, cis, straight men who have power, how do we get white men to share that power with us?
To me, I believe in what I call the 4 C's. I know that the diamond industry has their 4 C's, but I have my 4 C's. And that is that I believe that everybody can be a coach, a confidant, a collaborator, and a cheerleader. And no, I'm not talking about pom-pom wearing girls. I'm talking about the person that says, you've got this, and they remind you of the things that you forget about yourself. Last night, I was walking out with a mentor, and I said to him, oh, I really miss my other mentor who passed away. This problem that I have, if I had called him, he would have taken a different tact. And he said, it really pains me to hear you say that. And I said, why? And he was like, because you're perfectly capable of solving this problem yourself. And in that moment, I realized what a great cheerleader he was being for me and reminding me of the thing that I was forgetting about myself, was that I was giving away my power. I was wishing for someone to be there who's not alive today. And he was reminding me that I had it in me my entire time. So yes, I believe that all of us can do this, and white men in particular. The gentleman last night was a white male who did that for me. So
We can build and sustain communities with one another and have and share experiences and be each other's ally and cheerleader without the pom-poms. And so much of that, though, when we have conflict with people, is the one place that I like to think about it is everybody is suffering in some way, shape, or form. Everybody is trying to heal. And Robin, when you were talking earlier about the time that you took to heal, I'm like looking at you in admiration, because there's so many people that are hurting, right, that they can't see outside of themselves, right? So asking somebody to extend an either hand or some type of anything is asking a lot, right? Because if we haven't worked on who we are or what the pieces, the suffering, the trauma, the ancestral trauma, the intergenerational, right? Whether, whether that's folks of color whose families were colonized, right? Or white folks who realize that their great-grandparents were slave owners, right? There's so much that is embedded in us with and without our consent. And the first part is healing, and of course, healing ourselves, healing our communities, and making sure that we're advocating for one another. So my question to you all, and we'll kind of go down, is what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Find something you really enjoy doing and do it really, really well. If you don't love what you're doing, or at least really like it most of the time, if you don't like the impact whatever you're doing is having on the world, if you're not proud of the impact your organization is having on the world, I would say make a change. And I think it's really important to be very connected to what you do. The other thing that I would give my younger self advice on is step out of your lane. If you're an engineer asked to go meet customers, or if you're in finance, step over and talk to marketing. Look at the end-to-end big picture for your organization. Figure out what's important to the customers or consumers or people in the world that you're doing something to help, and kind of connect that bigger vision. And you probably will have tons of ideas on how things can be done better. That big picture is really, really important, especially as you start to have more scope over different functions.
I would tell my younger self to know thyself. Know thyself completely, thoroughly. Define yourself for you. do not seek others, the definition for you outside of yourself. I want to live more into and would want my younger self to know at a younger age, to just live into who you were created to be. You were created to be amazing. Be amazing. The second thing that I would tell my younger self is to, when you are in this self-discovery mode, is to figure out and identify what your unique light is. The light that you bring to yourself and the light that you bring to the world. And guard that with like you are guarding your life. Because as you go through life, as you go through experiences with different people that may not like your light, they want to dim it. And then if you choose to succumb to that, that's when you start to become small. That's when you show up small. That's when you are not your full authentic self. And this whole thing where we're talking about being your authentic self and coming into your own power is a cultivation. It happens over time. You don't wake up like this, right?
I mean, I wish I would.
You know,
I wish this was real easy.
you don't wake up overnight. It's something that you cultivate over a lifetime. If you start the practice earlier, dimming your light, you won't grow into being who you were created to be. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
The thing I'm going to say is shut down the voices. And before you refer me to a trained professional, no, I do not have schizophrenia. I don't have people that tell me to pick up a gun and kill people. But we all have voices in our head. And these voices were put in our head by someone, either a loved one or society or whatever you want to call it. But these voices tell us that we're not awesome, that we're not good enough, that we can't. So when those voices in your head start to rear their ugly head, just tell them, I'm awesome. And that typically shuts them down. They will come back again, but the more you say I'm awesome, the more they will go away. And eventually they'll stop talking to you. The other thing I'm going to tell you to do is build a community. It's so important to have a diverse community of men and women that do what I talked about earlier. You need to practice the 4 C's, and you need to surround yourself with people that reciprocate the 4 C's for you. And it can't be that you're taking and taking and taking and not giving back in return. You have to do both. You have to practice the 4 C's for others and then surround yourself with people who are going to give you that in return.
Thank you so much.